Whitelock TV live. Welcome to Whitelock TV. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know what they do on YouTube. They point to the bottom of the screen and they say subscribe and subscribe and follow and all that sort of stuff. Get the alerts. And if you're listening on the podcast, welcome back. And it's the first new guest we've had in a few weeks. Actually, no one's wanted to talk to me, but I finally managed to bribe someone into talking to me from Bond but Not Forgotten, and formerly of the Angels and any number of other touring acts. It's James Morley. Hey, James, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I got the $5. Thank you very much for that. So I'm here to chat.
You tell me when the meter starts to run low, okay, and I'll top it up there. Now, the first part of this sort of interview, we'll talk about Bond But Not Forgotten and explain what it is. Maybe some people watching in other parts of the world don't know what it is. It's a touring sort of concept a band focusing on Bon Scott. And you've had in the past many members of AC/DC in it, not at the same time they were in AC/DC, former members of AC/DC. And I just figure, like, this is your whole kind of idea. And I imagine there was a time in the past it was just a sort of glimmer in your eye, a thought in the back of your head. And now, you know, you're at the point where you should be playing your final show on this run tomorrow night. Is that right?
We should be, but thanks to you know what, we're not.
They didn't hear that. That was off air. James got COVID.
Yes, unfortunately, the last weekend of the run got canned because half the band ended up with the old COVID, which is a bit of a bugger. But we got a few shows underway. We were just hitting the straps as well. It was on fire.
Yeah. So, mate, how this whole thing, how hard was it to bring it from, as I said, an idea, something on the back of a fag packet to reality?
Well, anything to do with musicians is like herding cats. It's trying to get 5 different guys or guys and girls in a room at the same time is the hardest thing in the world, especially with some of the blokes that we play with. So the idea came about 12 years ago now. And I ran it past Simon Wright, who, of course, was in Acca Dacca from 83 to 89, I believe. And he loved the idea, but it did take a while to pull it together. The first lineup we ended up with Mark Evans. Actually had 2 former members of AC/DC in the band, and we ended up. I think Tony Carenti got up and did a couple of songs with us as well. So make that 3, you know. So it was a pie in the sky idea, but I mean it was a good idea on paper. It was like, if we can make this work, it would be absolutely amazing. And it took a while to make it happen, and when it did happen, it was absolutely amazing. We had I think Gleeso from the Screaming Jets and Skeeny from the Paw on that very first run that we did as well. And it was magic. And I think that's why, the intention was just to do a few shows first up, and then it carried on from there, It just became a yearly thing.
Yeah. And I don't want you to give up any sort of proprietary knowledge or business strategy necessarily, but is it almost a case of jockeying for position for that moment we all know will come when AC/DC cease touring, and one of these projects will be perceived as the most authentic? And if you're a Dio fan, for instance, you're going to play a Dio thing, at the end of the year, and we'll talk about that. If you're a Dio fan, you want to go see Last in Line or Dio Disciples, and I guess they kind of like jockey with each other for the fans' affection. Do you feel the same about AC/DC, that there'll be a moment when they stop touring, and that if you have 2 or 3 ex-members in the band, that suddenly this could really blow up globally?
To be honest, I hadn't really sort of put much thought into that side of things. I mean, we do our thing, like I say, on an annual basis. It all depends on who's available at the time and that sort of thing. I mean, there will obviously come a day when Acca Dacca do call it quits, and I don't think that day, unfortunately, is too far away, Let's hope that they get one more tour under the belt. Whether it be the album that was out, 2 years ago, or if they've got potentially another one in the can. But it would be awesome for them to go out and do one last hurrah. But when that does happen, look, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of AC/DC bands around the world, and I think they've all got their little sort of, corner of the world that they play at, and they've got their fan base, and they'll be happy to continue doing that. You know, there's a guy in Europe, Grant, that tours one, and they do it with the full scale, absolutely everything, the bells and the whistles and the whole thing, and they're doing big stadiums.
Especially the bells. Bells in particular. Yeah. So a few whistles, but mostly bells. Yeah.
Rock and roll train might have a whistle in there somewhere. And they're doing big 2,000-seater stadiums and all that sort of stuff. So, who knows what the landscape's going to be. I'll probably be too old for that sort of stuff in 5 years. I'll be, laying in bed with a cup of tea and a cigar and my slippers on watching reruns of Neighbours or something. Who knows?
You spoke to Phil Rudd and you spoke to Chris Slade, and they've almost played with you. Is that, are they contacts that are, sort of ongoing? And I guess in the second part, we'll split this interview into three. And I want to, if it's okay, one segment talk about yourself and your own career. And in the other segment, talk about AC/DC, just talk about recent events and stuff, books and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you've had those guys, in your sights in the past. Is there a prospect of having them as members of the band, in future?
Look, anything's possible. I mean, when I first approached Simon, he didn't know me from a bar of soap, and we ended up chatting and exchanging. Well, I sent him some stuff that I'd done and that sort of thing, and obviously there was a connection there with the Alberts connection from the early days of the Angels, so he was aware of the Angels and all that sort of thing. So it did make it a bit easier to sort of knock on his door and say, "Hey, mate, can we play together?" It's it's just all you got to do in those sort of situations is ask. I mean, with Chris, I think we approached Chris. Simon wasn't available one year. He had some prior commitments doing a European tour with might have been UFO or somebody at the time. It was a few years back. So I reached out to Chris, and he said, love to do it if the stars align with tour dates and all that sort of stuff. Same thing happened. He ended up, his management set him up with some European festival dates and all that sort of stuff. But the door was definitely open. Phil, we were dealing with his manager. I mean, Phil's, I think he's unpredictable at the best of times. But look, it was definitely spoke about, and we got to the point of speaking about potential money, which is obviously the bottom line for a lot of people when it comes to doing a project. Doesn't matter what the project is, it just couldn't make it happen. Towards the last hurdle, but that definitely would be a pretty amazing thing. Phil's been my hero as a drummer since I was a kid. When I first started doing music, I was a drummer, a poor one at that. But I tried to be Phil Rudd. He was my go-to guy I was watching when I was 8 years old, 9 years old, and so playing with him would be a dream come true for that reason.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Whitelock TV. If you're watching, just keep watching, and if you're listening, keep listening. And the second part of our interview with James Morley from Bonn, but not forgotten, and you might remember him also from the Angels. He's talking. Sorry, what were you saying?
So the extra $10 just came through, so I'm still here.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. Now, you're doing a project with Tim Ripper Owens later this year, which is a Metal Gods. And I saw in one interview that that as a bass player, you modeled yourself on Chris Bailey. So you and Ripper Owens kind of have something in common in that you kind of joined a band and replaced, your hero. And I wondered if we could go back to that. They made a film about Ripper Owens doing it. I wonder if we could go back to the sort of end of the 80s, and to how that happened, and because it is quite a kind of archetypal rags to riches rock and roll story, which we have seen played out, over the years. But most people can't imagine what it's like to do that, to be asked to join your band that you loved your whole life. Can you just tell us what the process was and what it was like?
I guess as a kid I was playing around bands in in Perth, and back in those days, back in the mid to late '80s, it was big business over here. I mean, we were doing probably 5 nights a week and playing to 1,000 people every show, and but our primary focus was playing AC/DC, The Angels, and Midnight Oil. So the Angel stuff that we were doing was, from that era that Chris was in the band. So he was very instrumental in my style of playing, along with Cliff from AC/DC. And I think, an amalgamation of those two is kind of where I'm at. So, being a big Angels fan, they'd just done I think it was the Howling album, not long after that, and I just heard winds that Jim had left the band or something had gone down or whatever. So I got in contact somehow. I have no idea how I did it, but I was pretty tenacious back in those days, and I somehow got in contact with Brent Eccles, the drummer, and I sent him over a video of me playing on like a telethon show over in Perth, which is a big fundraising TV thing. And it was me doing, I think it was a Kiss song, and I was singing and playing bass at the same time, wearing size 8 Fabergé jeans and some tennis shoes. Anyway, and so he got in contact and said, look, we're about to go to Memphis to record the album, but we're in Sydney rehearsing for the next week or two. He said, if you can make it over here, then come and have a jam and we'll see how it suits. So somehow I managed to get on a flight from Perth to Sydney, cost about $1,500, and it was right smack in the middle of an airline strike. So there was like one flight every 2 days leaving Perth, and it was with Ansett back in those days before Virgin and all that. And yes, somehow a lottery, of being able to catch a flight, I got the ticket. So I went over there, jumped in with the band. I think we jammed on 5 or 6 songs maybe, and they didn't want to do any standard Angel songs. They were running their new stuff, which was sort of becoming Beyond Salvation. So they just said, jam along with us and add what you think's going to suit. So it was basically just playing on the fly, and pretty much same day it was kind of like, have you got a passport? I said, nah. They said, well, we'll organise you one. We'll see you in Memphis in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And it's history. So it was kind of right place, right time, but in certain situations you've got to put yourself in the right place to be there at the right time as well. So, like I say, you got to have a bit of self-belief and tenacity to grab something that you really want. And I believed that I had the capacity to do that job, playing bass with the band, really well, because it's something that I'd sort of grown up on, and it was part of my musical psyche, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, that self-belief wasn't an ego-driven thing. It was just like, hey, this sounds like the perfect job for you.
Mm-hmm.
I just went for it, and it paid off, and rest is history, so they say.
And how? And that period was, I think, chart-wise, the Angels' most successful period. How did it end? How did that tenure end in the band?
I think I'd been there for a few years, and there was management changes and all that sort of stuff. The album after that I wasn't really keen on. I mean, I love Beyond Salvation. I think it's one of the best Aussie rock albums ever. It's right up there with 10 to 1 and East and all those sort of albums. It's a classic. And then Redback Fever came out, and it was like, oh, it was pretty lackluster and just not an exciting performance, I think. So that was one of the reasons. Plus, there were things like we'd just done a big tour playing with Cheap Trick, doing entertainment centres and all that sort of stuff. And then the band wanted to go back to doing small venues and that sort of thing. It didn't make much sense to me from a business point of view to get to a certain level and then go back down to playing 100 small gigs a week when you'd spend all that time getting to a certain level. So, and the constant touring, I mean, we were on the road, it was just never ending. It was airport after airport and car ride after car ride, you know. I ended up being an expert on high cars, which I never wanted to be, but I could
get bonus points. You get in the gold club for Hertz and Avis and yeah.
So reasons, and myself and one of the other guys at the time just became a little bit disillusioned, and we both left at the same time, and that was it really. You know, I'm a bit of a homebody anyway, so I kind of needed to come back to Perth and do my home time, as it were, with kids and family and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not big on being on the road for months and months and months and months on end. I can handle a few months, but 6-9 months away from your little ones is pretty tough.
Yeah. And then just before Doc died, there were alternate versions of the band, and by that stage you had converted yourself to being a guitarist, hadn't you? In a lead guitarist.
I got either promoted or demoted, depending on how you look at it. I was playing kind of second guitar there. I'd sort of dabble on lead, and I'm very, very average, but I'm a massive rhythm guitar fan, and the Angel stuff and the AC/DC stuff, all that sort of thing, very, very much lends itself to having that rhythm guitar background as the bed of the whole thing, where Angus and Rick can sing over the top of, metaphorically, with their guitars. That was unfortunately Doc didn't make it, and that didn't go ahead. But that would have been an interesting thing. We did one warm up show.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. It was out in the middle of nowhere, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was out in Onslow, which is out in the northwest. There's a massive mine site up there. One of the big companies, and they had a special event, and they asked us to come and play. So that was kind of our first and last foray. I've actually got it recorded. I've put a couple of snippets online for people to have a squiz at.
Wow.
But it was good.
Yeah, I bet it was. And at the time, it was a very acrimonious time, wasn't it? Whenever there's two versions of one band, there's a lot of drama. Was that ever present at the time, or?
Oh, look, it was circling, and obviously with certain people, it was consuming to them, not so much to me. I'm kind of like, it is what it is, whatever it is. Just get on and do with it. Everybody get out there, do what it is that they want to do, have fun doing it, and that's it. I don't read into too much of the crap that goes with it, and any further than that. If it doesn't affect me, then I couldn't give a shit, to be honest.
Yeah. Are you with original music and a new band and all that sort of stuff? Is that still something in your future, or your present? Is that something you still like to do, or you know what I mean, alongside these projects you've got going?
Oh yeah, no, it is. I was actually in the studio about 2 weeks ago, putting a couple of songs down of mine that I've had sort of floating around for the last couple of years, for with no intent or purpose to necessarily do anything. But if they scrub up all right, the producers having to play around with them. If they scrub up good enough, I'll just put them out there and see what happens. I'm not going to I'm going to go for a record deal and all this sort of stuff. The focus, original material wise, at the moment is my partner. She's an absolutely phenomenal singer. She's actually put a few singles out this year, and a couple of them got some really good traction and airplay and all that sort of stuff. So we've just started spending a bit more time in the studio concentrating on her stuff, with a couple of producers, WA-based ones, as well as some based in America as well. And I think that's... the rock thing for me, putting that out there, is a fun thing to do. For my partner, it's a bit more of a serious, direction that she's taking. So I'm spending as much time as I can helping her and guiding her and writing with her to get as far as she possibly can. She's got quite a little fan base. Anyway, she's always travelling the country and doing stuff. So covering my bits and her bits, so to speak. Can I say that?
Welcome back to White Line Fever. My name's Steve Mascord, and if you're watching, thanks for not turning us off. I'm talking to James Morley. Welcome back, James. More money's dropped in your account, so you're still alive. Yeah. Now, this segment, I wanted to actually talk about AC/DC because we're here because of Bond But Not Forgotten, which is your touring AC/DC show, which is not touring at the moment because you have COVID. But there's a lot of things happening in AC/DC. Well, firstly, your own personal contact with the band. Now, I heard that they asked you out for dinner when they came to Perth on the Razor's Edge tour via their tour manager. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool. No,
yeah. And you were a young lad then. You were 20-something.
I was a whippersnapper, yeah. Their tour manager was still is Mike. He's a Mad Angels fan. So when the band came over to Perth, I get a phone call from this guy saying, "Oh, hey, James, how you doing? It's Mike here. I'm tour manager in AC/DC. And just wondering if you'd like to come down and have a drink with the boys tonight, you know." Get off. I don't know where he's from. I don't know what that accent is.
Southern. Is he from Alabama? Dude, have a beer, dude.
Dude. Like it, actually. So I had to think about it for a nanosecond. I said, "Mate, I would absolutely love to. No worries." So, ended up going out with the boys, and we actually went to a Japanese restaurant where the old entertainment centre is in Perth there. I can't stand Japanese food. I don't mind it now, but back then it was like, oh, God. So I had a couple of sakis and, you know, they sneak up on you. And ended up having a California spring roll or something. It was like seaweed.
Mate, back then I would just eat tempura. Back then I didn't understand the raw fish thing. I love it now, but you just ordered tempura. It's like fish and chips, you know.
Yeah, right. Well, if I'd known that, I'd never been to a restaurant before. Anyway, I've had a bite of this bloody seaweed stuff, and I've politely excused myself with my mouth half full of this stuff. So I've gone to the toilet and just spat it out. I was standing there, I'm having to piss while I'm there. Next minute, Cliff comes in and stands next to me, and I'm just like, shit, what do I say? This is one of the guys, I've stolen all his bass parts for the last bloody 10 years of my life. I'm like, there you go, mate. Just like, shit, what do you say? But, ended up having a good chat with him, not so much in the toilet, but back at the table. And he's one of the nicest blokes in rock and roll, he really is.
Yeah. And then subsequently, they came to an Angels show at St George Leagues Club because James Young was on drums for the Poor, who were opening and who are over in this part of the world at the moment. They just arrived 2 days ago.
Yeah. Poor did. I think they did pretty much a national support run with us at the time, and they just had a couple of their songs. I think it's More Wine or something like that.
More Wine, Way to Please. Yeah.
Doing well, yeah. So, and James, who is just a typical young family member, as in Angus Young and Malcolm Young and that, his drumming, there's something in the blood with those guys. You just bottle it because it's bloody magic. And his drumming was that you could see him playing. Phil Rudd wasn't there. If he ever got asked up for the job, which I believe was spoken about, he would have just, you wouldn't have noticed the difference. It's just, like I say, there's something in the blood with those guys. I think it was Mel came down that night to show. Yeah. And
since then, I mean, someone said you were at Malcolm's funeral. I don't know if that's true. Yeah. And has there been any contact since the two incidents I've just discussed, aside from having former members in your actual band, aside from that, you know?
What, between me and AC/DC?
Yeah.
I keep in touch with Cliff. We chat occasionally. He rang me up out of the blue, like about 3 months ago. Phone rings, and I'm just sitting there at 6 o'clock in the morning having a coffee and a fag, and it's like Cliff Williams, and I'm going, what? Okay, hello? What have I done? do I owe you something? No, nothing in a formal sense, but I keep in touch with Ross a bit. Mal's son. Every time we go to Sydney, Ross has been a good mate for years, and him and my missus get along really well. So we always catch up and go out for. I was like, out for a drink. He doesn't drink, but we'll go out and catch up for a coffee and a steak sandwich.
Well, he's going to be at Frankie's if you go there anyway, isn't he? So don't know.
I think that's his third home.
It is. It is. So let's talk about some AC/DC stuff. Very recently, the Australian Story documentary, if it was a doc, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was a bit controversial because it kind of glossed over some of the things, that were in the book, the Jesse Fink book and stuff like that. What'd you make of that as an AC/DC fan? Like, was that fair enough? And what do you make of all the kind of and you make reference to it without being asked, some of the conspiracy theories, talking about Bon writing some of Back in Black. You've brought it up in interviews yourself. So where do you sit with all that? Do you think it's do you think there's a bit of myth building going on from the sort of AC/DC organization? They're trying to sort of build this kind of image for the future, and that they they sort of don't really like alternate narratives. What do you make of it all?
Look, I think potentially it's one of those things where they've whatever was said initially by the band or the record company or the management or whoever it may be was said, and once something's been said, it's hard to deviate from that without being labelled a liar. Anyway, so it's kind of like they either started out with the truth and it is the truth, or they've dug a hole and they can't get out of it, or whatever it may be. Look, as far as I'm concerned, in regards to the ABC thing, as a fan, it was nice to see his brother. Well, I don't know about nice is the word, but it was interesting to see his brother have a chat. It's the first time, the last time, as he said. That's interesting for a fan because a lot of people wouldn't even know what he looked like or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So, for the hardcore fans, we're going, oh wow, that's his brother. But as for everything else, it kind of nothing new came out of that for me. There was nothing interesting because I'd either heard it or seen it or read it before. So it was kind of like a 45-minute put together of everything else that had been said in the past, and some of the interviews were from donkeys ago. So it's kind of like meh, So I don't normally say meh, but my son says that all the time. So,
yeah.
From that point of view, in regards to, part of the reason why we were doing the Back in Black album on this tour is it's always been billed as a tip of the hat to Bon from the band. Mm-hmm. So there's a connection there, and like I said in interviews before, it's whether you go down the path of believing Bon wrote half the album or a lot of it or some of it or whatever. Personally, I hear a lot of Bon's very, very clever double entendres and stuff in the writing of that album. I also hear some of Mal and Angus's songwriting in there from stuff that they've done. They've written quite a few albums on their own, and there's a couple of things that you'd typically expect Brian to come up with as well. So I think there's an amalgamation of everything going on in Back as to what was at hand at the time. Luckily, it all came together nicely and made one brilliant bloody album, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And what about when Brian was had his hearing issues and Axl joined, and I think Brian was friends with a comic and said that my bags just end up being dumped in the driveway when I couldn't hear anymore. What did you make of that period as an AC/DC fan? And do you see the organisation as do you feel affection towards the AC/DC organisation, or do you see it as being a little bit malevolent? Same as like Kiss fans are the worst, right? A lot of Kiss fans hate Gene and Paul. They're still Kiss fans. You know what I mean? Like, so how do you feel emotionally towards the organisation and the band based on what you read and what do you feel positive towards them, or do you think maybe how do you feel?
I don't believe everything that I read for a start, but there's very very little to ever read about AC/DC because they keep everything
secretive. Yeah,
they're the most secretive camp on the planet, apart from the Rothschild family, I think. It is a machine. It's a money making beast of a machine. It's a brand. It's like McDonald's. It's like Calvin Klein. It's bigger than the band, and it has been that way for some time. It's a billion-dollar industry when you factor in everything that's involved to do with AC/DC. And you can't blame them for that. I mean, that's just something that evolved, and it's public demand that sort of put them into that arena of being so huge, such an iconic brand, beast, whatever you want to call it. You can't blame them. I think everybody's to blame if you want to find a blame for saying, oh, it's now a money-making machine. But as long as the music is honest and it's AC/DC, because AC/DC is a unique thing in its own right, as long as what they put out is still honest and AC/DC, then all the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's just music. And you either like it or you don't like it. And for me, I like AC/DC because I know what I'm going to get. They're like a comfy pair of shoes. They put an album out. I know what the album's going to sound like. And I'll pay me $30 to buy the album.
Did you like rock or bust? Tell the truth. Did you like rock?
Yeah, I did. Look, the last couple of albums.
The last one's good. I like the last one, but rock or bust was a bit cheesy.
I think Rock or Bust and Black Ice suffered from having too many tracks on it. They could have whittled it down from 12 or 13, whatever they had on Rock or Bust, to maybe 9, and it would have been like 9 great tracks. But there was so much deadwood on their songs that were kind of like, really? Why? It's like you go back to the days of Power Age where every single song mattered. Highway to Hell, every song mattered. Let There Be Rock. And I think with those particular albums, I don't know whether it was Brendan O'Brien's influence, the producer on those ones, that sort of as to why that happened. But what I did like about those is Brendan brought out Brian's voice a lot better. He was singing on the albums that he did with Brendan, as opposed to just coming out with the primal scream sort of thing. There was more melody involved, and there was some nice vocal harmonies going on. Never thought I'd hear an AC/DC song with country harmonies. What was that song they did?
Rockin' the Night Away, was that? No.
Yeah, that's the one. Rock the Blues Away.
Rock the Blues Away, sorry. Rock the Blues Away, yeah.
I mean, it's a great song, but it's like a down south country sort of thing you'd hear in a bar in Texas or something like that. But I absolutely love it.
We've been on too long, so we're going to have the third and final song shortly. But I think you'll find it interesting. There's a story that's been on rollingstone.com 2 days ago where a guy, he had access to this thing called Nexus Lexus, which gets you people's email addresses and stuff. And he actually got in touch with Eddie Van Halen and was friends with Eddie Van Halen during the last years of his life. And he said and by the way, Eddie Van Halen also, you can add him to the list of people whose Power Ridge is his favourite AC/DC album by a stretch. But he said that one of the reasons or the gripes that Eddie Van Halen had with David Lee Roth was that David Lee Roth didn't like AC/DC. And he said, I just can't understand. I can't just understand anyone who doesn't like AC/DC. So it was quite interesting.